RP Show continues on a glorious Thursday, and while we have Jessi Pierce with us in a second from NHL.com, Minnesota Wild coverage, and the Bar Down Beauties podcast. Hey, Jessi, couple things I want to get to with you first. I saw your take on Kyle Brandt's comments on not going on podcasts anymore because they're annoying. I wanted to know your take. What did you said, I feel heard, and you retweeted it. I wanted to ask you, what was your take on what Kyle Brandt said? Because we spent a lot of time on that today.
Yeah, I mean, he's not completely wrong. As a podcast host myself, I always am asking guests like, oh, hey, and we'll tag you, and can you share this and do all of that? So I get it. You sometimes got to pick your battles. That's not including this. I will always be a guest on the Rod Pedersen Show. Don't you worry.
How about that?
Oh, we all have opinions on it, and I just thought it was interesting. It's the biggest part of the sports media world right now. Like you say, you guest, but you also host, so I didn't know which side of the fence you're on. Number 2, Vikings tonight. How you feeling at Philly?
Not great. Not great. I don't know if you saw the travesty that was the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday, where it looked very much like a preseason game, and now a short week heading into Philly, again, on the road. The Philadelphia Eagles fans are out of this world, obnoxious, not feeling great. But then again, this is exactly the type of game the Vikings will win, just to regain that fan bandwagon, because last week I'm pretty sure a lot of Vikings jerseys were taken off in frustration, saying this isn't our year. It's just going to take one victory in Philly to get that back.
That's a good point. Hey, I don't cheer for teams. I cheer for players, really. I'm a Baker Mayfield guy, so sorry about that. Now, to the reason you're here, it's the Wild. What can you tell me about their rookie tourney team that they're going to ice?
Yeah, I mean, as media members have been clamoring, the Minnesota Wild's organization has one of the top prospect groups in their age range, which is great. It's fantastic. That will be put to the test this weekend at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, a tournament that Minnesota is hosting. Last year it was in Chicago. Next year it'll be in St. Louis. Those 3 teams all playing against each other. The big thing is Connor Bedard is going to make an appearance at the Prospects tournament. So yes, that's not Wild related, but Wild fans are certainly excited to see what they can do with that. In general, I think the 2 big names on the Minnesota Wild Prospects roster that will make a difference will be Jesper Valstead, the goaltender who Minnesota selected in the first round a couple years back, and Sammy Walker, a forward that got a couple looks last year in the NHL, did really remarkable things down in Iowa with the American Hockey League. Those 2 guys are the ones that will be heading into training camp when the Wild open that next week as players that could vie for some really good looks. Jesper will likely spend the year next year in Iowa, but Sammy Walker could have a really good training camp and come out. In general, this prospect tournament, it's just hockey. Minnesota, that's, as you guys know, we love it. It's nice to get some hockey back in the state of hockey for a weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, you mentioned Bedard. I'm a Bedard guy. Our poll question today is, are you taking the over or under on his points? It's 69.5 at our official sports book bet, Regal. Over or under, Jessi? 69.5.
Oh, man. Over. Give me the over. Why not? Let's slam that over.
Me too. Yes, we all are in agreement. We're all taking that. So I knew you knew your stuff. Ted in Red Deer wants to know, Jessi, do you have a prediction for the Wild this upcoming year?
In general, I think it's going to be a slight step back. Now, the Minnesota Wild, obviously, it's been well documented how handcuffed they have been for offseason moves because of those buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter a couple years ago. 2 more years, those 2 players are on the books, taking a hefty chunk out of Bill Guerin's wallet, which meant he really couldn't do a heck of a whole lot this year. He did sign Pat Maroon. He did bring in Vinny Lettieri as well, 2 very affordable players, if you will, but guys that aren't necessarily going to make a huge impact. So in general, I think it'll be a slight step backwards for Minnesota, but they're still playoff bound. The Central, as great as Connor Bedard is going to be for Chicago, I think the Central is still going to be pretty top heavy with Minnesota vying for that 3, maybe a 4 spot. Connor Bedard's going to help Chicago move up, just not to the place that they really would like to be, I'm sure.
Sure, I don't have them making the playoffs at all, but I do have the Wild missing. I have Nashville sneaking in because they did make some splashes. Sorry, but they did make some splashy signings there. I told you that I cheer for players, not teams. I love Sam Steele. Love him. And I saw him play through when they came through Sunrise. He was on the top line, and then some nights he's on the 4th line. Like, where do you think Sam Steele fits it. He did re-sign, did he not? I think it was only a 1-year deal last year.
He is gone. He is no longer with Minnesota. But I can tell you, I did like Sam Steele. I know. I think he's in Anaheim, somewhere out in California now. He played well in that first line opportunity. He really seized that, which I think was great. But then he kind of stopped. I don't want to say stopped working, but it just seemed like he took a step back in general. And when you're playing with guys like Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello, I'm sure it's probably hard to keep your footing and that momentum going continuously night in, night out, especially at the NHL level. So I think that's why. I mean, he spent a lot of the second half, unfortunately for him, in the press box. So the writing was kind of on the wall. And he signed as a free agent with, like I said, I think it was Anaheim. But wish him the...
Dallas, Clark says. Thank you. Somehow I missed that one. I must have been on the beach that day. Glenn in Medicine Hat, I hope this isn't putting you on the spot, but I don't think it is. He says, hey, Jessi, any thoughts on how Adam Beckman might fit into the Minnesota Wild plans this season? Saskatoon boy, Spokane Chiefs, great. He's been in that organization for a while.
Yeah, Adam Beckman was the darling of training camp last year. Everybody was rooting for him. I think he got a Gordie Howe hat trick in one of his preseason games. I mean, he showed that he was really capable of being a goal scorer as well as some of that physical presence. I think he will have a good camp, but there are very limited spots available coming out of training camp this year. You've got one forward position and one defensive position, and both of those kind of already penciled in. Marco Rossi, that first rounder from a couple years ago, will likely nab that forward position. Brock Faber, who we saw in the playoffs last year for Minnesota after he signed, concluding his collegiate career, he will likely be that defensive. So I'm always excited to watch Adam Beckman because he's got that physical presence, that feistiness that we absolutely love. So I'm sure he's going to have a fantastic preseason. It'll be very tough for him, however, I think, to crack into that Wild lineup coming out of it.
Well, he is, and I think Glenn would agree, we would say a hockey player. He's a hockey player's hockey player. And I got to say this, Marco Rossi, last I heard, I thought he was, I'm sorry, I don't say this facetiously, or I guess it is facetiously, I thought he was dying of COVID. Like he had some serious COVID issues, right? So what's the deal on him and expectations this year?
I mean, the expectations are through the roof. They're always going to be. He was picked 9th overall a couple years ago, but he really struggled getting back from COVID. It sidelined him. He had to leave World Juniors early, which was something that was very near and dear to him, but he worked his way back. Last year, he had a great training camp. He got into the lineup coming out of training camp, but then he kind of got buried in the third and fourth line. I don't know that he necessarily got the shot that they really needed. He went down to Iowa and spent most of the year in the American Hockey League, and he did really well. But every time he came up into the NHL lineup, it did not translate. So I think this year is a really big make or break year for him. Now, obviously, the Minnesota Wild brass want him / need him to perform well just so they don't have egg on their face with this first rounder that maybe doesn't quite pan out. But also, they're in desperate need of a number one center. We have Joel Eriksson, you have Ryan Hartman, who is technically your number one, but really there's no strong, steadfast depth up the middle, and Marco Rossi is supposed to fill that. So it'll be a huge camp for him. I think they're going to try to give him even more opportunity this year in camp and in preseason to really prove himself. And, I think with his health fully intact after 2 years being removed from that health scare setback with COVID, he should be raring to go because he knows that opportunity is there for his taking.
Well, Jessi, as always, this has been wonderful. I've said it before. I'll say it again. You know your stuff. You do a great job. And if you ever wonder, we all have your back on this show. So keep it going and enjoy the season. Let's do it again soon.
Appreciate it. Always good chatting with you, Rod.
Jessi Pierce from NHL.com and the Bar Down Beauties podcast.